Hi, I'm going to take you through hip flexor mobility drill. So first of all, we're going to start off just with working on the left hip flexor. So you're just going to start off in a traditional hip flexor stretch. And from here, we're going to look at the front leg. So looking for the shin to be pretty much vertical. From here, you want this knee underneath or slightly behind. The key is on here, initially, is to tuck the tailbone under. So make sure you've got that posterior rotation of the pelvis. The tailbone's tucked under. And you should feel that hip joint, that hip flexor opening up, hip joint going into extension. Okay, key is on here, is this front foot. So first of all, I'm driving my right foot into the ground. So it's going into the floor first of all. And then I'm trying to imagine sliding the heel backwards. That should load up the hamstring, right hamstring straight away, and feel a little bit in the right glute, predominantly through that hamstring. In theory, what I'm doing by sliding it back, I'm actually thinking about shifting my pelvis forward, but really want to avoid too much rotation. If I keep my tailbone tucked under, that hip joint should open up that little bit more, pretty much where we go. Now from here, we're looking at 2 minutes of just passive breathing. So really want to inhale through the belly button, through the rib cage. 5 seconds, breath in, and then fully exhale, letting everything go. That in itself will settle down the tissues in the hip flexor. Okay, what we're trying to work on. So still keeping the tension in this front leg. So you should always feel that hamstring doing some work. Keeping that pelvis rotated. Really work on that fully exhale. Okay, so after a couple of minutes from here, you should have probably gained a little bit of range of motion at that hip joint, felt that you've been able to open that hip a little bit more. So then we're going to work two types of contraction. One is to contract the hip flexor, make that muscle work. And then is to contract the opposing muscles of the hip flexor, which is the glute, to open that hip joint a little bit more. Okay, so to do this, what we're going to look to do is the tension stays, again, into this front foot, thinking about dragging it back, keeping the tailbone tucked under, so that pelvis rotated. All I'm going to look to do from here to contract this hip flexor, I'm thinking about sliding my left knee forward. The ground is going to stop it from moving, but have that intention of sliding that knee forward. So you should feel that this hip flexor is starting to work. So it's an isometric contraction through here. Going to build this up 15 seconds. Okay, want to get this up to 100% within that 15 seconds. After the 15 seconds, then we're going to look to just relax things off. And then from here, going to look to squeeze this glute muscle, keeping the tension in this right leg, but squeeze that glute muscle to open that hip joint. And then from here, to add a little bit of movement, you're going to now think about sliding that left knee backwards. So the combination of the glute and the knee, thinking about sliding backwards, is going to open this hip joint up that little bit more. So again, holding that for 15 seconds, just relax everything off. Have a deep breath in. Fully exhale, put some tension in the abs, so tense up the abs, and then we're going to go with that contraction again. So I'm thinking about sliding my left knee forward. This should be quite hard, pretty uncomfortable, quite hard as you're going. Trying to drive that forward. My right hamstring is doing a lot of work here. 15 seconds, 3, 2, 1, just relax it off, and then squeeze that glute hard. That should open that hip joint a little bit more. And then think about sliding my left knee backwards to open this hip joint. You should feel that you're gaining more range of motion at this hip when you're doing these. Okay, and then we'll just work that in for another round. So you can work up to 3 times through on that with a 15-second contraction. Okay, you obviously repeat the same thing on the other side. Okay, so if you're doing this in a mirror, it's always good to have the leg that's stretching. The one that you can see visibly. But once you've done that, then it's a case of now what we want to try and do is we want to actively work the glute muscle to extend the hip. We've gained some range of motion, we've opened the tissues up in the hip flexor, but now what we want to try and do is we want to try and teach the glute to create hip extension without going into lumbar extension. Okay, so that's the key on here, is everything wants to stay in a neutral spine position at the lumbar. So from here, set up various ways we can do this, but we can start it with a glute kickback exercise. So the key on here is to have even weight distribution on the hands. So you're starting off with the hands underneath the shoulders and then knees underneath the hips. We want to keep the spine long, okay, so neutral spine throughout. What we want to avoid is going into an extension through the lower back. So if you think about just pushing the floor away slightly and rounding the shoulders slightly, you'll engage through the shoulder girdle itself. Okay, so the glute kickback exercise is literally keeping the knee bent about 90 degrees and you're kicking the heel up towards the ceiling. Now the key is on here is to keep tension in the abs. So pull the belly button in, tense the abs up tight. That will stop the lower back from going into extension. So you're going to hold in here, really want to work and fight for that glute contraction and feel that that hip is opening up. 15 seconds and then we can just drop it down, have a slight rest, but then work the same side. So we're going to pick on one side. So every time you get this contraction, you should feel more muscle fibers are getting involved, more glute muscle fibers, and that in itself will help create that hip extension that's required. So you can work these in. 3 sets, good place to start. Can certainly build them up to 5 sets and working in and through. Keys on here is to try and ensure that that leg stays straight and avoid external rotation of that hip. Okay, so we're just working in there, just same exercise from a different view. All right, so another additional movement that we can create through here is to take yourself into hip extension and then start working external rotation. So that's me opening that hip out, and then internal rotation. So it's fighting hard to try and literally turn that femur both ways. So it should be real hard work either side, really trying to keep your hips square on. So not looking to open these hips out and rotate. We really want to focus on the hip joint itself, working through these small glute muscles, rotators of the glute, both internal and external. Okay, so that's another variation of that move where you're going into that hip extension and working internal external rotation. Another good exercise to encourage hip extension, but just working the hamstring and working the quad, so working through knee flexion and extension, is to start off again, glute kickback, heel up towards the sky, and now we can work a leg curling action, so lots of hamstring and then that leg extension. So from here, lots of quads, squeeze hard, pull back in, nice and controlled, really try and work through as much range as possible. When we're going into this leg extension, knee extension, you should feel the glute working real hard as that quad's on maximal contraction. If you find that you're cramping, tend to get cramping certainly going through in the hamstring, try to work through those as best you can. The cramping is just the nervous system getting confused, but with a body weight load, you're really going to be under, it's not under too much stress, and you're certainly not going to be pulling a muscle or fibers within that. It's just that cramping. If you can work through that, even better. For tight calf muscles and tender, for tender spots on the fascia underneath the foot, there's a few things that we can do. So first thing I would encourage is to roll the feet on a regular basis. So once, twice, even 3 times per week, literally just working a dog ball literally the ball for dogs works very well with that. It's slightly softer than something like a cricket ball. You could go with a golf ball, it's a little bit smaller, tends to be a little bit more harsh, but literally just working right the band from the forefoot to the heel in different spots in that fascia. You might find some tender spots in there, just trying to work through those. Followed by that, to work through the calves, we're looking for some traditional calf type stretches, and then looking to add some movement and some of the principles that we've worked with the hip flexor. So initially, just getting yourself into that traditional calf stretch, and again, deep breathing with any muscle will help relax it, stretch it, relax the tissues within here, but literally just looking to hold a passive stretch in here for a good minute. So from here in this position, we can then look to work a little bit of the contractions of the calf and the opposing muscles that stretches the calf. So from here, once we've gone into our passive stretch, we're going to do some active work. So from here, what I'm looking to do is keep good pressure against the wall, so I'm pushing that heel into the ground, and then I'm really looking to contract the calf by going up onto my toe. So I really want to work hard with the wall to ensure that that doesn't happen. So I'm pushing that heel down with my hands, but I'm trying just to lift that heel up. So I'm pushing through my forefoot, which technically is contracting the calf. Okay, from here, looking for 15 seconds. And then all you're looking to do is contract all of the muscles around the front of the shin that stretch the calf, that would actively stretch the calf. So I'm working real hard. Calf's getting a good stretch through here. Again, 15 seconds, then just looking to ease that off. Okay, and then we go with the contractions again. So I'm going to look to drive the forefoot into the ground. In theory, I'm trying to lift the heel off, but my body weight pushing hard on the wall to stop that from happening. Again, 15 seconds, just relax it off and then work it the other way. So really work those muscles of the shin area that would in theory be pulling the toes up towards you. They're actively taking you into that calf stretch. So the first one is you're pushing the toe down, or pushing my forefoot down, which in theory is going to lift that heel up. My hands are stopping me from coming up onto my toes. And then the other one is I'm really just pulling my toes up towards me, but from that calf stretch position. So these muscles here, in theory, are pulling the toe up, which is what they do, which is what we're doing, but then would stretch through the calf. So once we've done some repetitions of those, okay, you're going to certainly feel that calf muscle's opened up. And then from here we can do some dynamic work where I'm just stepping across my midline, and now I'm just using some rocking actions so that I'm going to get to even more tissues of the calf, keeping the heel down, rocking myself forward. I'm going to get a good opening up of that hip flexor. So this couples very well with the hip flexor work that we've gone previous. And I'm just from here again, then I'm just going to step across the other side, and now I'm doing that same rocking motion, working through and dynamically working through that calf. So you'll find that when I'm crossing over, I'm putting the foot into a pronation, so I'm putting myself into that arch. When I'm stepping away, I'm actually flattening that foot out. Sorry. When I go this way, when the foot flattens out, that's when the foot pronates, and then when it comes across the body, it supinates, so it basically goes into the arch. So anything where I'm stepping across, I'm creating an arch. Everything where I'm stepping across this way, I'm going into that pronation. So these are very good to do after a run. I would avoid doing the contractions, doing this going before a run, because you've really opened up the tissues. It's okay for doing some strength-based work, but not for going for long endurance-based exercises.